So why don't we start with a little prayer? Father John Riley in Winchester was going to be with us, and he called last minute and said he wasn't able to make it. Otherwise, I would have had him be saying an opening prayer. But why don't we place ourselves in the presence of God? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, we ask you to send forth your Holy Spirit upon us. Please bless us. Help us to turn our hearts and our minds towards you and open our hearts and our minds. There's so many gifts that you want to give us that we have not yet comprehended. Give us the grace to see more clearly and to respond more deeply to your invitation to life, especially to life in our homes. Please bless each of us here, our families, and all those who are not with us, all of our loved ones, wherever they are. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Well, I don't want to spend long welcoming you, but a very, very sincere welcome. Sophia and I are so happy to have you here with us. We feel very blessed to have this barn in such a wonderful place to be able to share with you. Much more to the point, the wonderful things that we're going to talk about and look at together is such a great gift to be able to look at together. So I'll just remind you quickly of the plan of the day. I'm going to give a presentation right now. 10-minute break. Sophia give a presentation. Then we're going to have that lunch that you're already starting to smell, which you're not allowed to be distracted by. So then we'll have that little lunch break. And then in the afternoon, what we have planned is I'll make a brief presentation. We have about an hour and 20 minutes there set aside, basically from 1:30 to 10 minutes to 2, and then, 10 minutes to 3. 10 minutes to 3, I'll just give a few wrap-up thoughts, wrap up at 3. Then anyone who'd like to take a little homestead tour, then we'd love to have you walk around with us. And that's going to be a little bit of a humiliation factor when you see how bad my peach trees have fruited this year and so forth and so on. It will give you courage that never fear. Go ahead and grow fruit. It doesn't matter whether there's actually any fruit on the tree. It's just nice to have fruit trees and think about fruit. Anyway, that's right. You can think about it anyway every time you see that tree. So we've slotted an hour for my presentation and an hour for Sophia's. If I'm honestly, normally I like to go short and leave time for question and answer, but because this time we do have the afternoon session where there's going to be time for question and answer also, I don't. If I use the whole hour in my presentation, I won't quite. But I ask your apologies for your forgiveness right now, and you'll be able to save your question. I think we'll have time for a little bit of question before we break at the end of my presentation. So then, again, a little break then, Sophia's, lunch. Restroom is right over here. Again, do not hesitate to come up and get coffee or anything else. There's water here and other drinks over here. I think that's it in the practical. Dear, can you think of anything else? She's gone. Okay. Anyone think of anything dramatic that I've missed that you need to know, practically speaking? All right. There's a lot I'd like to try to pack into this hour. It might get a little bit intense. I tend to get a little bit intense, so if I don't make a lot of jokes to keep you laughing, I pre-apologize for my intensity. I hope this will be exciting. I hope it will be challenging. I don't think anyone came today for therapy. We're here today because we want to look together at how we can try to improve our homes. So I am going to be challenging. And I'm just to say to you right from the start, I think a really, really important approach is never be discouraged. Wherever you are, the point is, by the power of God, by His grace, to begin today and ask ourselves, how can we make life, especially for the people that we love most, better? Whatever has been the case up to this point, life begins today. No one in this room has come from a perfect household, and no one in this room is ever going to have a perfect household. That's all part of the plan. But part of the plan also is that we do our best to make our homes the best they can be. That is what's always in our power. And all that God asks is, given the hand that we've been dealt, given the mistakes that have been made maybe toward us, given the mistakes that we have already made towards others, that should never be our focus. That's part of the story, and that will be part of the glory one day. When we look back and say, even though, even given this and that, this is what, by the power of God, we did. So that's our goal here together. Human life is about, I suggest, one thing: to dwell together with those that we love. To dwell together with those that we love. This is what life is about. I suggest that all formation is to empower people to dwell together with those that they love. From the start, it was God's desire to dwell with us, we could say, that prompted him to create us. It was God's desire to dwell with us that prompted him to redeem us. There really isn't anything else, I suggest. At the end of human life, what will have been the great shame? Isn't it this? We didn't dwell together well enough with the Lord and with others in the Lord, which two, by his great plan, are always essentially connected and can never be separated. But dwelling together is much richer than we've realized. And because it's much richer than we've realized, it's always much harder to do than we realize. It sounds so simple. I just want to be with the people I love. Look at the world around us, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone wants to be together. Everyone wants to be in love. They want to share life and love. But the great lie of our age is that you can have that in any way that you want, rather than recognizing the fundamental truth, which is actually the great gift. Because of how rich dwelling together in love actually is, it demands to be done in a certain way and can only be done in that way. And only if we have the humility to recognize that and bring ourselves into conformity with that plan will we ever be able really to achieve, again, I suggest the only thing that matters, that we really be able to dwell together in love. Only those who have done it really know. And the rest of us hope and pray and strive to learn. The home is where we learn to do it. The home is where we practice doing it. The home is where, God willing, human persons can come to have the confidence that the one thing we're made for is really possible. Think of that. All we really want, isn't it, is ultimately to be at home. But what does that mean? It's a home life that teaches us what it is to be human, what the entire point is. God help the children, and God help the adults who do not have in their homes a place of profound dwelling together, and thus a place that they really want to be. Now, I just said, God help them. May I say as a sidebar, God will help them. I don't mean that as though, well, what are we going to do with someone who doesn't have a good home life? That's not my point. I mean it in the way I'm saying it. God help the children, and God help the adults who don't have a happy home life, because they're going to need help. He will. He will. What are you and I going to do? We're going to recognize we're going to do all that we can to make it real for the people in our life. The two main parts to my presentation. One, understanding where we are now in our home life. Understanding where we are now in our home life. That's going to be the bulk of my presentation. And then secondly, a suggested approach to improving our home life. First, I just want to share with you a real quick story. It, to me, in many ways, captures what we're after here. There was a little boy who was being prepared for First Holy Communion by his father. And his father was struggling to express to that child the teaching about heaven. What will heaven be like? And the father was surprised at how difficult it was to express that to a child. This fundamental thing, this thing that you want to have the sense that a child would realize, well, oh my goodness, that's in some sense what my life is about. That's what would make any suffering worthwhile. How does one convey to a child what heaven will be like? So the father did his best. There'll be all the things that you could possibly want. This is what God has made you for. And you say things like, you'll see God. And the child said to his father, Daddy, all I know is if you and Mama are there, I will be happy. It seems to me this gives us an essential insight into God's plan in and through the children. We see the only things that matter. That might not be perfect theology, but I present for consideration, it is perfect. It's perfect in the way things should unfold, in their simplicity. Being with, that child did not know all that's required and all that goes into being there together. But what an insight. Let's understand where we are now. I'm going to suggest a key mistake of our age that is a mistake that I think that we are more subject to perhaps than we realize, and then a key alternative. So, what's the key mistake of our age that I think infiltrates our own thinking and acting? That what we do in our homes is more peripheral than central in life. That what we do in our homes is more peripheral than central. And I'm going to really challenge you, I'm going to really push you on this. I know if anyone in the room is asked, well, is what goes in our home central in our life? We all know that the answer to that should be yes. But to some extent, I'm going to keep pushing you. If we know that the answer is yes, are we living that way? May I make this suggestion? I have this opportunity often going over the old low water bridge down here, which is different than the one that's there now. Picture your life passing before your eyes. I would always, I'm one of those people that imagines horrible things happen. I go to a low water bridge. What if I get washed over? And I picture myself drowning. I probably need a therapist. There's something wrong with me. I don't know why that happens, but in any case, it happens. All right, so I picture myself drowning. And I picture what's going to go through my mind. And I suggest if you ran that drill, what's going to run through our mind is not going to be, how's our business doing? It's not going to be what my reputation is. It's not going to be how my finances are. It's not going to be certainly my physique. It's not going to be my game of poker. It's not going to be my game of soccer. It's going to be, oh Lord, did I do right by my wife and my children? That's what's going to pass through my mind. But do I live that way? So to what extent are we being affected by this view that makes home life be peripheral. I suggest for your consideration, this is a central attack upon truth, upon reality, upon Christianity, that home is not seen as being at the epicenter of life. There's various and sundry ways that infiltrates our own thinking. I'd like to suggest something. Especially, I'm going to direct my thoughts towards married men, though it's going to apply by extension to married women and also ultimately to everybody else. What else does a husband and father do than what he does in his home? Really, I ask you this. This is a serious question. At the end of your life, what will you have achieved? What is a life about having gotten done? Let me be philosophical with you here for a moment for the sake of precision. I'm not saying there's nothing to do outside our home. There are absolutely very important things there's our obligation to do out there. I'm certainly not going to in any way set that aside. Making our household, what we do in our home, is not the ultimate meaning of life. It is not the highest and most ultimate goal. However, I do assert this to you. What we do in our home should be our main daily focus and the main way in and through which we get any higher things done. May I put it this way? If we're thinking, well, isn't to give glory to God a higher goal than what I do in our home? Then I ask you sincerely, how do you intend to give glory to God in your life? If in some sense we have a higher obligation to serve the broader common good, I say, well struck, good point. Now I ask you, how are you going to serve the broader common good in any more significant way than by what you do in your home? Now, again, to be completely precise, I'll say there are certain ways, especially at times that men can be called to, where to serve the broader common good, they'll need to set aside what's going on in their home. Although I say this to you, in the, God forbid, but sometimes we need this to keep order in our life, there's a situation where a father is called away to defend the country, and he might well lose his life. And his little son says to him, Daddy, but what about Mama? I present for your consideration, that's where Daddy says, Son, I know you might not understand this right now, but I'm not leaving Mama. This is part of how I take care of Mama. But only in an extreme situation would this man ever leave Mama. In an extreme situation, there can be higher things you have to be called off to. But in general, the way that you serve anything else, most of all, is by what we are doing in our home. It's in this light, ladies and gentlemen, that I take a quotation from Wendell Berry from the quotation sheet. I didn't get a handout. May I just borrow that from you right now, Stephen? Thank you. So, thank you, dear. If you could just give one to Stephen. You don't have to have this handout. This is the handout that says a few quotations on it. I'm going to give you a quotation here from Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry isn't the be-all and end-all guru, but this quotation right here is going to be rather striking. You ready? Thus, farm wives who help to run the kind of household economy that I have described are apt to be asked by feminists, and with great condescension, what do you do? By this, they invariably mean that there is something better to do than make one's marriage and household. And by better, they invariably mean employment outside the home. I know that I'm in dangerous territory, and so I'd better be plain. What I have to say about marriage and household, I mean to apply to men as much as to women. I never heard anyone say this in my life until I read Wendell Berry saying this. And it changed things for me. For men as well as women. I do not believe there's anything better to do than make one's marriage and household, whether one is a man or a woman. I do not believe that employment outside the home is as valuable or important or as satisfying as employment at home for either men or women. It's clear to me from my experience as a teacher, for example, that children need an ordinary daily association with both parents. They need to see their parents work. They need at first to play at the work they see their parents doing, and then they need to work with their parents. It does not matter so much that this working together should be what's called quality time, but it matters a great deal that the work done should have the dignity of economic value. All right. We're going to end up circling back to those last couple sentences, and some of the main concrete suggestions that we're going to make here today are going to come out of what he said there at the end. I want to throw out at you from a theological perspective. I would want to qualify what he says when he says, what I have to say about marriage and household, I mean to apply to men and women. I don't believe there's anything better to do than make one's marriage and household. I think from a theological perspective, there is a higher vocation than household, but nonetheless, fundamentally, here, I think this is an extremely important insight from the viewpoint of natural reason, particularly for those that are called to marriage. Again, here's Wendell Berry, just saying, what else do you do than make a marriage and make your household? And I'm suggesting it's this that our age has sold for a pot of porridge. And men and women find themselves inclined to go do something. And I'll keep pushing you. Ask yourself again and again, what is the something that we're leaving home to do? Sometimes we have to leave. But to think more clearly about that. A few key principles here about household. Now I'm going to get a little bit philosophical. Give you a definition of household. The community of shared daily life constituted by nature for human happiness. The community of shared daily life constituted by nature for human happiness. Nature, that is a divine plan, gives us the household to fulfill what human persons need in order to flourish, in order to be happy. When I say happy here, I'm not talking about that happy feeling. I'm saying it the way that Aristotle would, of happiness in the full sense of what we're made for, what we're made to do. A flourishing household is the daily context for human flourishing. This is what human happiness looks like. What do we picture when we picture human beings flourishing? I present for your consideration how we imagine that is exceedingly important. We all need to do this. When I say every couple in the room, every person responsible for a whole household, including a household of one, needs to begin with a conceptual and imaginative process. This is absolutely key. What is the life we're trying to craft in our home? What basic features must it have? And then more concretely, in what particular ways are we going to do it? What does it look like? We'd like to help you here today conceptualize it and imagine it. What does your flourishing household look like? We got to conceptualize it. We got to imagine it, because imagining it is the first key step to making it happen. So I'm going to start at a universal level and then come a little more in. Let's think about how we're going to conceptualize this flourishing household, this place of daily human happiness that we want to have, that we want to forge together. Isn't it to be a community that is of certain kinds of people, that's forming and encouraging people to become a certain kind of person? We can say, who live righteously, who live virtuously, according to God's plan. We could call this holiness. We could also then say this must include in it being capable of profound friendships and other relationships. So here's what we want. This is the key first step in conceptualizing this little community, where we're forming people, encouraging people, including ourselves, to live righteously, to live virtuously, and then to have the natural fruit that comes of that being the foundation for being actually able to dwell together in love, to have the only kinds of relationships that actually are the remedy to loneliness. For when you have this kind of relationship, you're never lonely, wherever you are. So our goal is to have a community of this kind of people, forming this kind of character and these kind of relationships. So I'm going to assume that everyone's with me and willing to say our primary goal, we can just say, for shorthand, great character, great relationships. This is what you and I have to craft in our home. A community of great character and great relationships. What else do we want? Now, that's 50,000-foot view. It has consequences for what we do every day. If I'm a monk in a monastery, it will look a certain way, because a monk in a monastery is about great character, great relationships. Everybody's life is always about great character, great relationships. Most of us are going to be in a household. What does it look like in households? Here is the key principle for us. I think it's the key principle of the day. According to the providential plan, the actions of attending to the ordinary needs of human life provide the natural context for developing character and relationships. I'm going to say that again. According to a providential plan, one we never could have thought of, we never could have come up with such a wonderful plan. The actions of attending to the ordinary needs of human life. That's what a household's about. The ordinary needs of human life. The actions of attending to those things, that's the natural context to grow in character and to grow in our relationships. So this is custom made. The things that we would naturally find ourselves doing in a household, particularly if we were in a more natural context where our households hadn't been so emptied, we would have found ourselves doing the kinds of activities that are the natural context that are well suited. Doesn't mean it's going to be an automatic, but are well suited to developing character and to developing relationships. Here's the plan no one but God could have formulated. It's such amazingly good news if we focus on it. Attending to those needs. Think food, shelter, warmth, community, cultural expressions, stories, these fundamental, simple needs. Children need stories. Have we noticed that? They need stories. It's a fundamental human need they have. Daddy, tell me a story. Daddy, tell me a story. Unless they're just kind of drugged by watching things on television, they're going to keep asking for stories because that's a natural need that they have. But these simple things, and of course, we naturally have stories to share with them. So attending to these things are precisely the means and the context to achieve the deeper, the fuller flourishing. Indeed, attending to this, it's not just the means, it's the way we do it. This is why household is the main stage. For spouses to enact their life together and for children to be formed. So the ordinary needs, by a natural plan, give shape to our life. So especially in the home. So I might say what today, especially when it's going to be about, is trying to read the plan. This is what the wise always do. God always knows. And He has set things up if we look, if we have the humility and the docility to look at the natural plan. It's astounding and astoundingly challenging, but it will work all that our heart could possibly desire. The two great needs in life, the kinds of actions of fulfilling them now, I divide into two, and this is going to give us our focus moving forward: work and leisure. Work and leisure, that great little duo. The duo of home life by a natural plan. So I can already give you the major conclusion in the presentation. Renewing work and leisure in the home is the key to the home being the place that they and we want to be. For the title of today was making our home a place that they want to be, but really, the prior thing, and I say this especially to the dads, but also, to all of us, if the home isn't the place that you and I want to be, the children are certainly not going to want to be there. If their sense is that Dad, if Mom is looking for the exit door, then for goodness sake, why did they have to be there? Is it just the years of getting by until they get to go out there? And now would you mind telling me what they're going to do now that they've gotten out of their home that was just drab? Now they get to go out there and now they get to do what? Start it all over again. Start their own household. where they don't want to be, and their children are looking for the exit door. Renewing work and leisure in the home is the key to making the place they want to be, we want to be, a place humming with life, deep relationships, rich character. In view of this, let's make a quick further analysis of our situation, looking at facts on the ground. Think of our homes today. What better analysis could be given, just noticing the facts, versus traditional homes? And by traditional homes, this is why Wendell Berry's been so helpful to me. I grew up with the misconception that the 1950s home was the traditional home. And I think many people still picture in their mind a traditional home looks like Leave It to Beaver, where dad pats the kids on the head, gives them a kiss, then walks out the door with the briefcase, and then shows up later tired and then reads the newspaper, and mom's doing all the work, and somehow this is the traditional home, and somehow the children, especially the sons, for mercy's sake, are supposed to find this interesting. Traditional homes, it doesn't have to be an agricultural home, though that tends to be an easy archetype to picture. Traditional homes had a lot of things going on there, work and leisure. And let me tell you right now, ladies and gentlemen, I am not the one that's going to say, so you just got to go pull a Little House on the Prairie lever. Just go pull the lever, folks. I'll meet you on the prairie. And our children are going to be real happy then. That lever's not there. There ain't no such thing as Little House on the Prairie. If you've read Wendell Berry, there ain't no such thing as Port William, Kentucky. It has vanished, and to try to find it is a waste of time. You're going to have to craft a household of the 2023. You're going to have to craft a household that preserves key things that are going to make people want to be there, but it's not by trying to paint a picture of something that we've read about in a book from the past. The reading books from the past can help give us certain principles. So if we're looking at our homes now versus traditional homes, well, the thing that you most notice right off the bat, it's the removal of work that went on in the home, but also the removal of leisure. The removal of both. One key illustration of this removal of each. The work men do in the home tends to be extremely peripheral. Think about this. Even the kind of involved dad. You picture him, what's he do? On a Saturday, he goes to Lowe's, and he's got that project, and he's going to fix the things that broke this week in the house. God bless him. That's great. So he's going to fix everything that broke this week in the house. This is the work that he does in the house. Then he's going to go back to what he normally does, right? So his work in the house, consider that, versus a man whose work was much more intimately a part of what went on in the household. That's two very different things. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not trying to make fun of that man. To some extent, that might be you and I doing our best. I'm just trying to paint a picture so at least we know what we're dealing with and what we're striving for. Think how much more we men experience the work we do outside our home than the, quote, work we do inside the home, which tends to be reduced to, again, kind of, we're real happy if we build a bed for, one of the children. Again, this is a great thing to do. But think how peripheral that is, really, compared to a traditional household. So we just need to get that in our mind. How about leisure? I don't want to just unnecessarily bash the obvious, but, well, I'm going to. For all of us, most of us, I'm right here with you. Our leisure is generally reduced to entertainment, and the most obvious example of that is the things that we watch. And I absolutely think there's a place for watching the good movie. But consider, on the one hand, here we are, consuming our entertainment versus sitting around, maybe doing something with our hands. And somebody takes up a line of music, and everyone else in the family joins in. This is an exceedingly different kind of thing. And it's not just a romantic, well, how would you possibly do that? In any case, I'm just giving you some images to picture leisure the leisure that can happen in a home, especially, dare I just say right now, especially if a father's heart is invested there. God bless the mother who is constantly trying to have there be some fun. And what are we going to do now, kids? And how we're going to read something out loud. Where the father is not taking the lead in that. The difference that makes here in the leisure. Further observation of our situation. The negative consequences are most evident in the weakness of our relationships. And I'd say especially with the children. All right, so look, this little section right here, this might get a little bit intense. If I get a little bit too much in your face, if I go a little bit, leave the reservation, then just forgive me and say, well, okay, he's dealing with some big problems and you don't know what they are, and that's probably true. All right? What do our children really need? After the most basic physical needs, what they need is relationship and a sense of belonging that comes fundamentally from the relationship with their parents. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, that our children are suffering. And I think a lot of them are actually suffering really bad. Not all of them. I don't want to be unduly negative, but I think it's worth our taking a moment here. Something I think points a little bit to the significance of lost shared work is this. Quick anecdotal thing. Often I'll notice that from a strong family, the young ladies have more of a sense of direction in who they are. Have you noticed that? That often the young ladies from this family more have a sense of who they are. Often the young men are a bit adrift. I suggest an explanation that might illustrate this point of shared work. In our deeply broken culture, I think, at least in some homes, at least sometimes, you have the situation where a mother has been able to mentor her daughters in certain fundamental arts, even if it was just that she got the daughters more involved in taking care of the other children. Those girls got a little bit of a sense of what it means to take care of people and to have certain womanly arts. And I'm convinced that's one of the main reasons that young ladies, by I think a rather noticeable percent, are more healthy in these days, able to more make it through in these broken families, although I'm certainly not suggesting we don't have a challenge with the young ladies. Our young ladies are dealing with a lot in the culture, right? Little appreciation of real femininity, hypersexualization of beauty, along with the general objectification of women that comes with it. The fact that the generally prized notion of success is a bastardized version of masculine prowess, one that particularly draws women away from their deeper flourishing. The young ladies have plenty to deal with too. But allow me a comment on our boys. What do our boys do? In this, particularly if a boy in this age is not academically inclined, I think these boys find it exceedingly difficult to have a sense of self-confidence. What do our boys have in our hyper-education, academic education? Think about that. For children, it's almost off to school, how are your grades? That less involved parents in case, how are your grades? How are your grades? Well, Dad, actually, they stink. I'm a little bit of an idiot, all right? Now what? Oh. What do you do with that boy? Is it sports? Sports are controversial. This is a little bit of a tricky one. Sports, I tell you right now, I think sports have their place, but I will say this to you. Sports will never give a young man the most fundamental sense of who he is. Excelling in sports, it has its place. But look how obsessed our culture, what do we give our children other than academics and sports? Academics and sports, as though there's nothing else to life. And so often, sports ends up kind of turning more to kind of my prowess / winning. when all of our flourishing ultimately is in serving and taking care of people. In any case, I think it's a rare involvement in sports that teaches a boy that your manliness will be in taking care of people. So our boys are adrift. Very often, mother, even in the very involved families, is overseeing his education. Education, again, fundamentally tending to be academic, and otherwise he's left to his peers with precious little real mentorship from his father or other adult men. Here, if I may be bold, is a crisis very discernible in many strong communities, including our own. The number of young men that turn to various addictive things, all very ready at hand. Among them, alcohol is only one notable instance, is a serious sign that things are profoundly amiss among the boys. Ladies and gentlemen, no pointing of fingers here. Let's all take a deep breath. We're all in this together. What we can do in our homes for our boys and our girls is a shared issue. But we need to begin by recognizing, and I'm especially saying that to dads, I exceedingly rarely meet a young boy who's college age who looks me in the eyes and says, my dad and I, exceedingly rarely. We can improve. One more thing to notice about our homes, though, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just the children's relationships that are suffering. It's our spousal relationship. For the same context that's missing for them is missing for us as spouses. Consider how often we hear this. It's hard to find quality time together. Often we feel as though we're just staying afloat. Husband and father feels that finding a good work-home balance is almost impossible. The wife and mother feels it's hard to connect with her husband. It's hard to be really part of his life. This is because there's so little going on in our home. There's no magic solution, but we just need to recognize that. I'm going to give you another quotation here. I'm on number 2 if you want to peek at it on your page. This is Wendell Berry again. Without the household, this broke my categories when I read this. It gives you a whole new view of marriage. Without the household, not just as a unifying ideal, but as a practical circumstance of mutual dependence and obligation, requiring skill, moral discipline, and work. That's a little masterpiece. I know it's hard to tune in on. Husband and wife find it less and less possible to imagine and enact their marriage. Can I just read that sentence again? Without household, not just as a unifying ideal, but as a practical circumstance of mutual dependence and obligation, requiring skill, moral discipline, and work. Husband and wife find it less and less possible to imagine and enact their marriage. I just think that sentence is a masterpiece. Without much in particular that they can do for each other, they have a scarcity of practical reasons to be together. They may like each other's company, but that's the reason for friendship, not for marriage. Aside from any affection for children they may have and their abstract legal and economic obligations to each other, their union has to be empowered by sexual energy alone. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's about a whole course in itself right there. That sentence I just think is so great. We're not going to be able to go off onto that. The challenge, at one point, Wendell Berry just said that point more point blank. You know marriage is not going to last when it has to be empowered by sex. And he says, what do people getting married today have to do together? They each have their own job. They put their children in daycare. So during the day, they have their own life. And then presumably, they have sex at night, and then they go back to their life. And we're surprised this relationship doesn't last. Wendell Berry so powerfully and beautifully says, by a natural design, sexual energy should grace the activities of a vibrant household. But in our age, it's been abstracted from its natural context and made this kind of little god in itself. And it leaves us very empty. And may I just say as a sidebar, how hard, I think especially upon wives, who particularly have that sense of the marital intimacy has a natural context to it. And there's something that doesn't seem right when a man that she loves very much, but nonetheless seems to be on a different trajectory in life, kind of shows up. This is extremely hard on the whole relationship. In any case, what I particularly wanted to see there in Wendell Berry is we are suffering, you and I, from the lack of richness in our home. It is undermining our relationship with our spouse. So, a different approach. I'm going to give you, very briefly, a couple thoughts on something different we can do. Start with the end. There's a certain kind of life we want to cultivate here. Go back to what I said about conceptualizing and imagining it. There's a certain kind of life we want to cultivate here. One that prioritizes character and relationships. Character and relationships. Let's set our intention on this. It has material and has spiritual aspects. They're deeply interwoven. It's already a huge step if we resolve, especially as parents, as spouses, even in a household of one. It's always about character and relationships. This is what we're going to make first in our life, naturally speaking. Step 2, take concrete steps in view of that end. The main principle I've already enunciated was this one. Attending to ordinary needs is the context for growing character and relationship. I'm going to put it to you this way, a simple way. Matter matters. Matter matters. If our goal is to form a certain kind of person, we begin by sculpting the material arrangements of home life. That is every material aspect. I mean what we're physically doing, where we're doing it, how long we're doing it, as well as the physical house and our homestead. Sculpt the material arrangements of home life as a way of sculpting the whole human life. Please understand, when I say sculpting the material arrangements, I don't just mean physical things. I don't mean like what pictures do you have hanging in your house, although that's included. By the physical arrangements, I mean especially the physical actions and practices. And ladies and gentlemen, here's the excitement. In one sense, here already is Wendell Berry's principle at work. If as spouses, for those of you who are married, you set forth to say, okay, this is our project together. How are we going to make this real here together? Dear, my heart is with you. I still, for the sake of our family, I've got a lot to do out here, and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to ask you to support me. We're going to be together in this, but I'm always going to try my best to remember that everything I do there is fundamentally subordinated to what I'm doing here. Here's my life project, dear. Let's do this together. How are we going to do this? How are we going to begin by sculpting the material arrangements of our life, starting with the very practical things. How much time are we going to spend on this? Where are we going to go? What's it going to look like? Yes, there's always a danger that the externals can become empty forms. But let's not worry about that. We'll address that by remembering our end. It's always about persons. It's always about the persons that I love. One main suggestion then, and then I'm going to close. And this suggestion will then become more concrete this afternoon. Become more productive rather than almost exclusively consumptive in the home, in work, and in leisure. So this is going to be my main payoff. This is going to be my main concrete suggestions this afternoon. I'm going to lay out some more particular things I'd like to discuss and have you all share some things that you've seen. But I just, right now, I just say, think in terms of work and leisure. How are we going to sculpt The work, it's a material, fundamentally thing. So what are we going to set up here as a context for us to do together unto the goal that we've spoken of and agreed upon of building character, deepening relationships? This is not just with the little ones where it's easier to do, and this has got to carry over into the teen years when it's going to be much more challenging. And we'll talk this afternoon. Right now, I'm not, we can say, is it gardening? Is it carpentry? Is it what kind of work is going to go on in the home? There's many other examples. And then the leisure, the things, the meaningful leisure activities. And I'm saying, particularly to the dads, that am I involved in thinking it through and then making it happen? I conclude with an appeal to husbands and fathers. Here's a great question for us to ask ourselves. Will they know? Will they know in a profoundly visceral way that there is nothing I'd rather do than be with them? Does my wife know in a visceral way that my joy is to live, to dwell together with you? Do my children feel that? Show me a boy who feels that from his father, and I'll show you a boy who will stand tall in this world. And you and I can make that happen. I am going to close by reading you a quotation. And on reading this, you might, again, could be discouraging. We could think, how can we do that? Wherever we are, whether we're grandparents, it's about households. How can we make ours in a way to be an example to others? How can we empower others to do that in theirs? I'm going to end right here, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions. This is a quotation from Pope Benedict. I didn't give it to you. I'm going to hand this out afterwards because I wanted to read it to you, and I didn't want you to be reading it yourself, right? But I got it right here to hand out to you. Sorry, it's just a thing I got. 2012, they had a World Meeting of Families. Some of you have heard this before. It's one of my favorite quotations on the planet. And a little girl from Vietnam says, "Hi, Pope. I'm Kat Tien. I came from Vietnam. I'm 7 years old. I would like to present to you my family." She introduces them. "I'd really like to know something about your family and when you were little like me." And I'm pretty sure that this was off the cuff. When Benedict XVI was asked, what was it like in his household? It's just nice sometimes to have images. Holy Father says, "Thank you, dear, and your parents, I thank you from my heart." Well, you asked about my memories of what my memories of my family are like. There would be a lot. I'll say only a few things. Sunday was always the important time for our family, but Sunday already began Saturday evening. Father read the readings to us from a book that was very popular in Germany at that time. The book also included an explanation of the readings. That's how Sunday began. We were already entering into the liturgy in a joyful atmosphere. The next day we went to Mass. My home was very close to Salzburg, so we had a lot of music, Mozart, Schubert, Haydn, and when the Kyrie began, it was as if heaven had opened up. At home, the big lunch together was naturally important. We also sang a lot. My brother is a great musician. He composed music for all of us already as a young man, and the whole family sang. Dad played the zither and sang. They are unforgettable moments. Then, of course, we took trips together, walking. We were near forests, and so walking in the forest was very nice. Adventures, games, etc. In a word, we were one heart and one soul, with many shared experiences, even in very hard times, because it was wartime. First there was the dictatorship, then poverty. But this love that we had for each other, this joy even in simple things, was strong. And so we were able to overcome and endure even these things. I think it's very important that even little things gave us joy because the other person's heart expressed itself in this way. And in this way, we grew up in the certainty that it was good to be a human being, because we saw that God's goodness was reflected in our parents and in us children. And to tell you the truth, if I try to imagine a little how paradise will be, I think always of the time of my youth, of my childhood. In this context of confidence, of joy, and of love, we were happy. And I think the paradise must be something like how it was in my youth. In this sense, I hope to go home, going to the other side of the world. Those are my thoughts for you. Thank you very much. All right. So here we are time-wise. I think we started 10 minutes after, or quarter after. So I'm going to keep it from that. So we have 7 minutes right now, 5 to 7 minutes. If you have a few questions right now, or if you just want to let that sit and not ask any questions now, ask questions later, that's fine. So I'm just going to say, anyone have a question right now? Throw a dart, tomato, caramelized piece of bacon you shoved in your pocket. If you have anything you want to send my direction at the moment, that's fine. Or if you just want to let that sit, that's fine too. Joel, please.
One of the things that kept going.
Oh, sorry. I'm just going to hand you a mic.
Sure.
All right. So, although you are speaking very loudly, but I think that. Let me see if it does. If that doesn't work, I'll just have you scream. Is that on, baby? Wait. Try it now.
Yeah. Hello.
Okay, there you go. Shoot.
All right, Dr. Cuddeback. Thank you first of all for the presentation.
You're welcome.
One of the things that was running through my mind, and I know it's something that we personally as a family struggle with as well. Obviously, we want to be home. We want to make that valuable time. We want to prioritize that time a lot. But then there's this plethora of all sorts of endeavors that are outside the home. Many of them very enriching, like today, for example. We're not at home with our kids today on a Saturday. We're here, our kids are with a babysitter. But this is something that's good and enriching and is ultimately going to influence our life in the home for the better. We hope and pray.
I do too.
Yeah. So, I guess my question is, so how do you strike the balance between this, what is, as far as I can see, more than enough, outside opportunities that enrich the home, and not trying to overindulge in that at the expense of the life at home? And
Good.
I want to speak particularly to that and like time with extended family, for example, especially in a culture where we have so many, so many of us have our brothers, sisters, cousins all around, and we want to cultivate those relationships. Yep. But then also, how do you balance that with the home? Thank you,
Joel. Great question. All right, so here's just a thought. In the classroom at Christendom, I love to say, often when a student says, how do you strike the balance between X and Y? I like to say to that student, you're already halfway there because you framed it well. You recognize that you need to strike a balance between X and Y. And the main way to strike a balance between X and Y is to seek to strike a balance between X and Y. Right? Truly. Now, you might say, what principle did we use? It's Socrates put the good life, I think, in one phrase that's perfect in Christianity and transcendently. Live as though what's most important is most important, and the lesser important things are lesser important. Socrates summed up the whole thing that way. He said, I just simply ask people, are you living as though what's most important is what's most important? So it is always going to be about hierarchy. We can't fit in everything. This is the art of living, Joel, and all. And part of it is going to be just a couple quick things. Part of it is going to be willing to say no. Part of it is going to be giving up certain things you would have loved to have, and it's hard. Very simple example. My son wants to play both baseball and soccer. I'd love him to play both baseball and soccer, but no. You're not going to be able to play both baseball and soccer as great as that would be, because that's going to compromise something in our household. Boom. And so we can't. A thing that we've seen in our own life that you touched off by your question. If you're blessed to have extended family around, your relationship with some of your other friendships is necessarily going to suffer. That's just going to be the case. My friends who don't have other relatives around, they actually spend Thanksgiving and sometimes even Christmas together. Not me, but I wouldn't trade it as much as I miss that, because I have extended family around and I'm going to spend it with the extended family, and so I can't do that with my friends. So we're constantly going to have to be making those judgments. What are those? I talk to young couples all the time. Well, should we move back and be near so our children are near grandparents? Right? Family and those few good friends are exceedingly important. How do you strike the balance of leaving to go to things, be involved in your parish? We have too many demands being made upon us. Right? I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus. Do I ever show up at the meeting? No. Do I feel guilty about that? Yes. But then again, I don't feel that guilty. Simply, I'm glad some do. Right? Each of us are making our own judgments. And it so happens that that's not one that I'm able to do, and maybe you are able, but that's where I have to be able to discern that with my spouse. But all in view of what so often gets compromised, the richness of our home life. We're going to have to be willing to suffer in foregoing certain things, and I do think we'll come back to this. Note how the Pope mentioned Sunday. Going to have to carve out that Sunday. I remember once a friend that invited to do something with us on a Sunday said, got to be with the family. We're just not going to do that on a Sunday. I remember being a little bit frustrated. Families are going to have to make their decisions and carve out that space. You're going to have to be strong, and you have to use your own judgment. You're going to expect other people to trust you, and you can't have more friends than you can have. Don't try to have more intimate friends than you can. That's a big part of the life. Any other thoughts or questions now? Thanks, Joel, for asking that. Anything else at the moment? Yes, please. Miss Federico. We only have one more minute.
Okay. Well, it was just more of a comment on, not so much a question, just something that I experienced going up to, they have a homestead up in, the one that is Salison, or up in Ohio? Who is it?
That's not Joel Salatin. Joel Salatin's but go ahead.
Okay. So it's another one of those big homesteaders, and I went and just spent the afternoon with them. And one thing that I was really struck by is that this communal life that they had with each other, because you grow up in your mind thinking mom does this, dad does this, mom's in the house and dad's outside cleaning things. But they had such a communal life where they had this idea of what they wanted their home to be. And so when something had to be done outside, they all went outside and did it. And then they came in, and then the husband helped with dinner, and then the kids went downstairs and they gathered the things. And there was no duties or chores. It was such a unified mindset of how, or coming in and if laundry needs to be done, we all kind of do it together. And I, being not having a family of my own or anything, I think that it's how crucial it is to have that within your own family, but then how I was touched outside of that, of noticing this beautiful life that they had together, and it was really palpable. You kind of felt like there was a string that was attached to each one of them, and how they just lived communally. So I don't know, I just wanted to,
that's a
what
great.
you were saying here,
Right.
I actually experienced it being there, and how
Right.
what a gift it was for me. And I think that we have that obligation for our families, but not to even undermine how incredible of a gift it is to others, to say no to certain things, because
Right.
you're actually having an effect on people.
That's a great. Thank you, Larissa, for sharing that. I'm going to quick follow-up thought, and then we're going to and then please hold your any other questions, and we'll have plenty of time this afternoon. One thing that someone who lived with the Amish said: why did they get so much done, but never seemed to be rushing? And he found it was because they did so many things that were multi-valued. They did the things together. Their recreation was very often at the same time also a work. And they did so much together, they weren't always looking the need to find other time. Well, I need to catch up with that person, I need to catch up with that person. I throw that out and I close with it to husbands think about it as regards their wives. I'm all for the importance of the date to catch up. But I throw out at you, I mean, some of you are in the reading group right now, Hannah Coulter. Nathan and Hannah have a beautiful relationship. I don't think they really went out on dates. There's a place for it. But if a husband cultivates a way of being present to and with his wife in the activities of the home, I think it dramatically lessens the need for date time. And that, Joel, I go back to your question on trying to fit everything in. If spouses are always having to run off to catch up with one another, it's understandable, but that's part of a kind of disorder of our day that says something about the structure of our home. Now, again, we might have to reckon with that. Now, I'm not saying there's not a place for the date, but what about finding the ways to really be present here in especially the work and leisure? I think that's going to remove the need to do a lot of the other things that we're trying to squeeze in. Thanks for your attention. We're going to take a 7-minute break right now. 7-minute break.